Going. Start webinar.
There you go.
And recording to the cloud, hopefully. Give one more second here to go live. And we're up. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Johnson, and I'm here with another Close the Distance New Year's Eve edition. Joining me today are Monica Nixon. Good morning, Monica, and Happy New Year to you.
Same to you. Good morning.
Almost Happy New Year.
Almost.
Well, for those of you joining us here on the last day of 2021, we've been spending the last 10 days or so keeping a promise to myself. Thank you again, Monica, for your and Eric's contributions to that fulfillment. I hope I can do the same for you someday and help you keep a promise to yourself. But for those who haven't been watching this, a year ago, I told myself that in 2021, I was going to bring back a show called Close the Distance, but as a live stream, not just a webinar. And Monica, you helped me do that. So again, I'll be forever grateful for your. Well, we're missing Mr. Garland today, but Eric Garland is our other member of the trio here, and Eric is the principal at Competitive Futures. Monica, tell our audience who you are.
Oh, gee, it's so early and I haven't had enough coffee. I'm not sure.
No pressure.
No. Oh, yeah. I head corporate strategy and intelligence for Vanguard, the cybersecurity company, not the mutual fund company. So that's who I am. I used to work for Hewlett Packard and do strategic intelligence there. So my background is pretty tech heavy.
Perfect. Well, our topic for today is in the last 10 days, really, we've been going through an array of control factors known as STEEPLED. And for those of you with a background in strategic forecasting and analysis and intelligence, the STEEPLED moniker won't be anything new to you. It is short for social, technological, economic, ecological, legal, political, ethical, and demographic. And we covered those 8 domains over the last 10 days or so once we got through introductions. And the phase where this sort of fits is, as intelligence analysts, one of our jobs is to help to define for our stakeholders the boundaries of their macro environment. Because if you don't define the boundaries of the macro environment is the whole universe, and that's too much for anyone to act on. As intelligence analysts, that's how we measure our value, is by the actionability of our output and the yield potential of those actions. So what kind of difference can we make to the organizations and people, decision makers that we support every day, and what it is they're trying to do in the world? And it's usually in terms of projecting power into that macro environment in some way. And it begins with the discovery of those boundaries. Who are the stakeholders that our entity is serving as an actor, projecting power into that macro environment? What are their issues? How do the landscapes that we are active in compare, and what are the trends within those landscapes that are driving the future? And so for the last 10 days or so, Monica and Eric and I have been talking about those social, technological, economic, ecological, political, legal, ethical, and demographic trends and issues that are really driving that future. So Monica, I've got a couple that I can start with if you'd like in terms of the 2021 retrospective and kind of the 2022 outlook. Or I'll defer to you if you have something in mind.
I have a great idea. Why don't you start with the 2021? And I just made myself a little note on my screen of what I think, how it's going to play in 2022. So I'm going to let you segue into it.
Okay, beautiful. Well, one of the things that I think is, I call these meta trends because unlike trends and mega trends, trends are really the ways in which forces are changing your macro environment within your macro environment. Mega trends cross macro environments, and they have more structural changes that ensue. Meta trends are the trends that actually change itself. And so I think that it emerged in the last couple of years, the decentralization meta trend that I find just really, really compelling. And I'll use the example of distributed ledger and Bitcoin, frankly, as an asset class to describe what that meta trend is all about. And I think in terms of DeFi, decentralized finance, Bitcoin showed us that there are stores of value which are beyond the control of central bankers. And central bankers really hate that idea. Now, whether or not you believe that the CIA or the NSA is behind Satoshi Nakamoto and that, this is all a giant, criminal conspiracy by the central hegemonic government authority that runs our lives for us and that allows us to, believe we have power over our own lives. I believe that decentralized finance and the vision of the future that decentralization bears, where individuals are in control not only of their assets, but their data, even their identities, and their ability to be anonymous and hide behind a wallet address that can project an identity into a group or into a macro environmental space or landscape. I believe that's one of the meta trends that'll change things forever. So going into 2022, what's your take, Monica?
Well, so you brought up privacy. I think that there is going to be an impetus to do something with the likes of the Facebooks, the FANG type companies, and this, that, and the next thing in privacy. While the millennials may have been encultured to believe that privacy isn't important, certainly people in our generation, I guess, what do they call us? We're X.
Xers, yeah, Gen X. I was born in 70.
Me too.
I won't ask you to reveal your age.
I just did. We were born in the same year. So
all right.
70.
All right.
I think people are seeing some of the issues there. And, you've seen various other countries. California put through a privacy type law with some teeth. Not sure how well it's stuck. But I think we're going to see something like that. But the advertising industry and this, that, and the next thing, of course, and they're going to fight back against that very ardently. But I think there's a huge need for it when you start relating it to issues like cybersecurity, which is my dominion. Yeah. I think we're going to see more pressure for something like that in the coming year. Housing, something has clearly got to be done there. You can see that the housing market is indeed blowing out. You've seen Treasury FinCEN come out and pretty much admit that they know that illicit foreign investment, money laundering had a lot to do with this inflation, something I think we knew full well. It didn't take much to figure that one out. Didn't have to be a brainchild. But if you already look at toward the end of this year, you can see that I think there's some interesting things about trying to clean this thing up, because I think you and I both know that the way that things have been has kind of reached its zenith.
Yeah.
That something has got to give. And you can't print your way to prosperity. There's nothing in economic literature that indicates that we can keep doing what we're doing. And it still stuns me that we've managed to keep it up for 13 years. Wow. But I think we're at the end of that road. If you look at, it's taking ever more QE and ever more this to keep this zombie sort of walking, sort of on life support. And yeah, it's not going to be something that's tenable on an ongoing basis. And I think the Fed knows that. And you can see kind of the blowouts, every time they even think about, raising something a quarter basis point to price risk accurately, right? So they're, like we've kind of talked about, there's no nice way out of this. I mean, I think you and I both know that what they've kind of, I think, thought they were going to do is modern monetary theory, something that's never been tried, right? We'll print money, you're going to let us do it, and we'll decide who gets it. And yeah, no, I don't think so, right? I don't think people, if God forbid that they accept that, right?
I think we just ran that experiment in the last 21 months, actually.
They have run some of those experiments, and they were pretty big failures. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting that you bring up the Treasury, because I think as the power slips through the central government's fingers, so to speak, and their ability, credibility. Yeah, credibility. Yeah, that's really it. And so there's another meta trend is that, and it's connected with decentralization, which is the corrosion of conformity and compliance with central authority. I think there is just a real breakdown.
Growing distrust.
Yeah, a growing mistrust, exactly, of people in power and what those people in power, what their ulterior motives are, because it's clearly not the welfare of the people,
Well,
right?
with that in mind, I mean, let's just look at that through the lens of one of the big things we've had governing our lives for the last, 2 years, this COVID thing. In your professional work and in my professional work, okay, if I had come out and made statements, or if you had, to your clients, nonetheless to the world, as Fauci has done, the CDC, the WHO, and been so demonstrably incorrect, and then
Yeah,
trying to change things around, I don't think we'd still be in the intelligence field.
right. Exactly.
And there you have it. So I'll leave that one there. I mean, I don't think anyone that's a thinking person can ascribe too much credibility to those individuals anymore. Right.
Mm,
But we're going to
yeah.
flatten the curve in what was it?
2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks flatten the
Right.
curve. Exactly.
Right. And now, we're on our third, fourth variation, of COVID and whatever, and the whole list. And, oh, well, masks work. Well, no, they don't. Oh, ivermectin, it doesn't work. Oh, well, actually it does. And many of the more detailed things from some of your research that you've done. I mean, everything has been a farce.
Mm,
So, and for something that, like we've discussed, that we seem to have this idea that people don't die, I guess. And, we touched on it a little bit, but have you looked at the numbers of, for example, going back to credibility, if we're in a pandemic, right? Is there a whole bunch more people that died in 2020 or this year than there were, 2017, 2018? I think the answer to that question is no.
huh.
Where's the pandemic, folks?
The numbers that I've found most concerning are the all-cause death numbers from non-COVID
Uh-huh.
related deaths, and a lot of those deaths have been happening in places that shouldn't see people dying. Young people, I think, taking their own lives, or however, there's a lot of that happening. There's a lot of drug and alcohol abuse that's come as a result. A lot of the isolation and depression, and
Yep.
people not treating otherwise treatable conditions, even cancer, heart disease, a lot of that stuff
Well,
that accompanied the lockdowns, essentially accompanied public health policy as
yep.
opposed to accompanied the pandemic.
So the mental health impacts is something I hear the psychological community talking about, because I have a lot of friends who, and you probably do too, that have come from the world of profiling and this, that, the next thing, and that
Yep.
have backgrounds in behavioral and forensic psychology. And that's something that they have mentioned to me, is the explosion in, and it is, I think, on the table, that this has been a very, very big issue since this whole COVID thing, because it's changed all the elements of our lives, how we interact. Like you say, you put two people in the house, if there's any problem in their relationship, it's going to come to a head.
Right.
Right in the midst of all this. And then you mentioned the other day that, people are not having children. Huh. So, these things, I mean, it's just amazing when you really look at the confluence of all these things and how it's changed all this. Wow. And I've heard so many people pumping the mantra that, we're never going to go back to normal. This is the new normal. I don't think so.
Yeah, I disagree with that now too.
We can't survive as a society. I don't remember if it was you or it was Eric that sent me that piece about how societies disintegrate.
Yeah.
Or, what happens. It was something called the mice 25 or something like that experiment, where they took 25 mice, they changed all these things, they gave them all these things, and how it all played as they tried to play with all these different things that was outside of the norm. And it didn't take long before they were all dead, to summarize the whole thing. So I just don't think that we can continue this way with this much dissension, this much turmoil, lack of stability, inflation. I mean, whoa. Like the mental health impacts you said, the game board's got to get leveled back to where we can have civil discourse, where people can actually afford to live. I mean, one of the funny things, I mean, I'm kind of getting off bent here a little bit, but I always find it funny how we talk about middle class in this country and what constitutes that. You ever notice there's no real operational definition?
Not lately, that's for
Uh,
sure.
Not for a long time. I
Yeah.
mean, this would be an interesting little discussion here as part of this. I mean, your idea of the income that it would take to be middle class versus my idea. Let's put that on the table.
Yeah.
Okay, just let's just take for a single individual. Okay, and we'll leave out the super expensive, San Francisco, New York City. And I know that it's market driven to a certain degree, but I mean, okay, I live in a state that is one of the lowest paid states in the nation. It usually vacillates with what is it? West Virginia, Louisiana. I can't remember the other one, whatever the bottom three are.
Hmm.
But okay, to have, let's just say, I mean, defining what middle class even means. I mean, my opinion is that even for a single individual like where I live right now, if you want to have a nice middle class lifestyle, some people are going to radically disagree with me, but when you have your average house here now, well, it's not even average. It's an entry level Corey Barton house that is mostly junk that I would never buy. Not to personalize this, but starter homes, right? In Boise, Idaho, your median family income is 65, 70,000 a year. If I don't think it's even broached 70, I think it's 60 something still.
Mhm.
That's insane. So,
Yeah,
and to rent a 3-bedroom house is $2,000 a month. Okay. So what does it take anymore to be middle class, live on your own, if you will? Let's just take a single individual, have a nice home, have a nice car, good food to eat, organic, local, healthy, whatever. I'd say you need 100,000 a year.
I was going to say that. If you spread it across the country, 100 grand is kind of where that's at. Now, when I graduated from college in 1992, my roommate, who's now actually CEO of a pharmaceutical company in China, believe it or not, but
I think you mentioned that.
My old college roommate he was looking at job offers where the starting salary was about $25,000. And of course, this is, 30 years ago. And we sat around and we talked about what in the world would we spend all that money on? How could you
30 years ago, right?
How could you possibly spend $25,000 on, in a year? And of course, we were students at college, undergraduates, and I think my food budget was $5 a day at the time. And sometimes I would go hungry in order to afford beer, on the weekends.
Hey, it isn't so. Yeah.
Those were also the days when the union would have a 46-ounce beer for like $1.30 or something. And so it only took like $2.50, and you were pretty well set for the evening. Anyway, I think today it's probably about 100 grand to really be independent of outside underwriting.
Well, let's just look at it. You're a single individual. You want to live by yourself. To pay a $2,000, let's just say rent. You're not going to go and buy in this bubble, whatever. Generally, any legitimate landlord with a decent property is going to tell you they want you to have 3 times post-tax, right? What the rent is. That means you have to be raking in $6,000 a month, which is $72,000 a year. Figure what? If you don't have any kids or anything like that, 28% tax bracket at least.
Yep.
You need to be throwing 100 grand.
Right. And scrape by with 100 grand. That's the other.
Well, if you look at how expensive food is, and of course, when the Fed is admitting that inflation is 7%, Marta Weber and I were talking about this the other day, it's about 4 times that.
Right. Yeah.
They change the basket. They do all these other, little things with the calculation, just like how they do unemployment, which is a total fraud. How they, say that and then they change it and this, that, and the next thing. That might be a conversation about what they've changed with methodologies for calculating things and the distortion there, and another conversation when we're really going to get technical. But that would take a lot of prep for both of us, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can sit here and list out some things that I bought that I've watched how expensive that they've got in the last couple of years. I'll give you an example. Local organic hamburger in Boise, Idaho. Okay. You used to be able to pick it up for $5.99 a pound, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it as high as $11.99 a pound at Whole Foods.
Wow.
In the co-op. No kidding.
Double. Just in the last
couple years, yeah. Cleaning supplies, like for your house.
Hmm.
stuff like that. There's some things that I buy, and I know that they're up at least 33%. Um, and it's kind of this wild thing when you start looking at it. I mean, I could build a list. It's just, oh, how about eggs?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the marketing on eggs, as you probably know, is one of the biggest frauds that there's ever been.
Oh, I love that story.
Oh yeah, you're thinking the same one I am. Mine.
Yep.
So God, what is the brand? I'd have to go to my fridge. It has a little black thing across the top. Organic, cage-free, blah blah blah. I think, they used to be $5.99. I've seen them as high as $8.99.
$8.99 for a dozen.
Yep.
That's a buck an egg almost. I mean, so I got 19 chickens out in this little building out here.
Well, you're going to be a rich man if you could sell those eggs for a buck a piece, buddy. I'm going to go throw some chickens in my backyard for that.
I'm like, geez, they're organic. I guess we do give them like scratch grains and some feed and stuff like that, and they eat a lot of bugs. Occasionally, they'll break an egg and they'll eat the egg. And it's surprising. People who don't have chickens are often shocked when they learn that chickens' favorite food is chicken. they love.
You have cannibalistic chicken. Oh my God.
I believe, because they're dinosaurs, and I mean, if you were a dinosaur, you'd probably eat one of your own kind if it was available, and you were hungry enough. Human beings have been known to do that, from time to time throughout human history. But to your point around the price, the accelerated appreciation of prices, this is one of the things that I think is a meta trend. And for lack of a better word, and I don't think I'm the one coining this, I think I heard this somewhere before, but I'm calling it cross-inflation, or crossflation, excuse me, crossflation. And the way I think it's defined is that there is inflation in all the things that you need and deflation in all the things that you don't need. And so your big screen TV, that was $5,000 last year is $500 this year. Your eggs are now a buck an egg, where they were a dime an egg a few years ago. Things like that. So those dynamics, food, energy being the most volatile. Well, volatile just means that it's not actually that anymore. It's not that they're ever coming back down again. I don't ever expect eggs to get cheaper, thus my own personal flock of chickens. And I think that's actually something that will happen more and more as people will begin to build their own productive infrastructure in response to the expectations of inflation as expressed by appreciation of prices. Now, I'm, as an Austrian economist,
that's right.
I believe that the definition of inflation is the growth of the money supply, M2, which of course, a little over a year ago, the Federal Reserve announced they were no longer disclosing. It's not that they're no longer what they actually said was they're no longer tracking the size of the money supply.
Well, they know what the size of the money supply is. You bet they know.
You better believe it. And as the money supply continues to grow through QE, predominantly because interest rates are effectively zero, they're going to have to go to a negative interest rate. Well, we're in a negative interest rate environment. We are taxed at the bank every time we do something that is beyond the norms. It's not that they're taking money as a result of saying negative interest rates. But if you put $100 in the bank today, December 31st, 2021, you'll be lucky if you get $98 back out in December 31st, 2022, just from the fees alone. If you don't put inflation on top of that, traditional, depreciation of buying power of the fiat currency unit. And so I think where I'm going with this is, I got my wife a very, I'll call it a selfish Christmas present, which was an integrated distillery for liquor. Now, my wife doesn't really drink that much, and I like a little tipple every evening. Typically, I'll have a drink or two. And so why did I do that? Why did I invest in the infrastructure to brew alcohol? Because I expect alcohol to go up in price, and it's a good idea.
It explodes in usage when people are under this much strain. All your vitamins, you bet.
It's not only a good idea to be able to produce your own supply, but gee, what if I were to find myself in need of an
business
income? Exactly. So, I'm not saying that I decided to invite my wife to become a moonshiner with me, but I kind of did, kind of like we got, into the chicken farming business a little bit as well. And I think that is one of those meta trends that people will begin to drop out of the elements of the consumer economy as their consumption becomes self-producible. And, that is part of that whole.
And they're going to find new ways to buy and trade to get around all the interchange fees on all their transactions. I mean, Amazon and Visa, they've tried these stores, right? That are cash free and this, that, and that. Didn't really work, did it?
Yep.
But yeah.
Barter as a means of exchange of value has been something that humans do by nature. I mean, that's how we operate. I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
And that's exactly what they don't want to happen.
Well, it's pretty hard to tax it. It's pretty hard to tax it when it's invisible. And I'll throw out another one of these, and I think it probably is a meta trend, is central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, which of course China is the pioneer here because they want to attach your ability to buy as a consumer to their ability to give you fungible currency with which to buy. And, in the last several years, as I've traveled to China, cash money is still around, but it's not accepted as, you can't necessarily walk in with 100 RMB note. I have one here, actually. Do I? Well, I have a 10. I don't have, there's inflation for you. I've got a bunch of foreign currency sitting on my desk, but the notion that you can walk in with fiat currency and buy things, China's really the innovator there. They're the ones who are saying, no, we don't like that because we can't attach that to you. And your buying habits need to be something that we document as part of your social credit score.
Which gets back to that privacy thing again.
Yeah, privacy. Exactly. Yeah. And the expectation of privacy. I think that's something that has been.
Well, the expectation of ever having any liberty and freedom without being monitored. And people may think that that's not important. Well, we know how you and I feel about that. So doesn't bear repetition here.
There's a chilling effect, though, on debate that happens when you know that whatever you say can be taken out of context at some
and utilized against you.
Point in the future, it can be used to cancel you. Exactly. And I think, I'm not.
Well, look at the COVID debate, right?
Yeah. I try to be as apolitical as possible. Now, Ron DeSantis answered a question by somebody, I think it was somebody from CNN, and the question was brought up about him being under investigation for something. He actually addressed it directly to that journalist who was bringing it up, but the journalist selectively left it out of the reporting that was done. Now, I think so much of what's happening in the manipulation of us as a people is happening based on that selective editorializing of things that are being said and the deliberate misrepresentation. And it's on all sides. It's on all sides of the political aisle, misrepresentation of whoever is outside your group or tribe. And
it's very easy to do when 6 or 7 companies control the entire dominion. And when you see Mark Benioff from Salesforce buying magazines, whichever one, I can't remember what he bought, and a variety of other very wealthy people. I mean, what, Bezos owns the Washington Post, something like that, right?
Exactly.
Oh, Lord Almighty, yeah. Freedom of the press. Oh boy, baby. I don't think so. Freedom of how much money you've got to get your message pushed.
Truly. Yeah. And I think that's what it boils down to is,
and we've never seen it quite as strung out as it is now with the social media thing, to where, well, yeah, like Eric said the other day, it's a term I'm familiar with, I think you are too, horseshoeing.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't matter if there's any truth in there whatsoever. I mean, let's harken back to Kellyanne Conway, right? When she came out, I mean, this was a pivotal moment to me, and said, well, we're just going to present alternative facts. I went, what?
Yeah.
Wow. No, Kelly. And I can't remember who was querying her that day, but, and They were perplexed. They were like, what? Yeah.
Yep.
Alternative facts. And it's like, well, Kelly, it either happened or it didn't.
Yep.
And we've seen, if you look at all the White House press secretaries, particularly during the Trump administration, Scaramucci or whatever his name was. Could make that guy up. And the one they have now, and what was the Huckabee one or whatever her name was, and Lord Almighty.
Yep. Circle back to Psaki.
Right.
No, I think that's
and she said
some
just insane things.
Yeah. Well, and when she was out with COVID a few weeks ago, her replacement wasn't any better. So this is I wouldn't necessarily put this into Metatrend territory, but I will say there is just really broad distrust of whoever's the mouthpiece, whoever is mouthpiecing the people in power.
So what does that really mean, Eric, is the point.
Exactly.
So what that really means is we have reached the end of the viability, in my opinion, of the extant paradigms under which our lives have sort of used to work. So the finance industry, which we didn't take the opportunity to contain and control, rather we bailed out, and then what's his name? Oh God, the guy that was Paulson and all these guys. Oh, they saved the universe. No, they didn't. And now we see, the lingering, well, it's more than lingering, the absolute decimation that these people have done to our way of life. Like you say, the export of inflation. Okay, we both ascribe to some of the same economic philosophies here. Look, when you build up this kind of debt, right, you went to business school, 3 ways it ends. You and I both know what they are. They tried to inflate the debt away, didn't work. So, it either ends up that you have inflation, hyperinflation, collapse, whatever, or you write it down. Well, they haven't wanted to write it down. And so now we're sending everybody stimulus checks. Okay. And there's been so much fraud, insider trading. I mean, I don't know who I was talking to the other day, but Nancy Pelosi lost her mind when remember that when somebody had said something about, maybe you guys, if you're regulating these companies and they're basically your corporate sponsors, that you trading and doing all this, maybe you just shouldn't really be able to do that.
Exactly.
And she's like, what? Yeah. Okay. And okay, everybody, if they have a few functional brain cells, has to know, same thing. Housing can't go up like in Boise, Idaho, 38.5%. without some form of manipulation while wages are flat. It does not happen in a normal environment. And if you look at, we've talked about this the other day, how many years do we have of housing accrual data in this country? Hundreds. Notice, if you go get this chart, and I can provide it for Edson, that until Greenspan came into the Fed and started playing all these games, right? Housing's pretty stable line.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, right, you get the Greenspan put, you get all this other stuff, you get, the blowout with the .com thing. It's like, okay, what are we gonna, how are we gonna get this wealth effect thing going again? Oh, well, let's play with housing. And it's been, we saw what happened last time. A lot of markets, they blew up, they dropped 50%. I think the drop this time is going to be more significant than that because the run-up's been higher to revert back to the mean. So something has to give here, is the point. I mean, we can't keep running these little bubble games that wipe everybody's wealth out every few years. We were on a 7-year cycle. We've managed to extend it with copious amounts of QE, bond buying, you name it, bailouts, this, that, and the next thing. I mean, no one's buying this anymore.
Right.
Everybody knows it's a rigged game with Wall Street. If you want me to tell you how rigged, we'll do that offline. We'll talk about co-located servers. Okay. And how they manage to trade a few seconds in front of you, me, or anybody else. And myriad other things about the financial plumbing that a lot of people that are close to it kind of understand, which you're probably aware of some of it. Not talking about like company, but often.
You've probably heard of Robinhood, the sort of popular with the kids because the trades are free. And the old saying of when the product's free, then you're the product. That could be, more true than in the Robinhood situation where I think their largest shareholder, I can't remember who their largest shareholder is, but it's one of the big hedge funds. And of course, they use that data in order to look at momentum in the markets and get ahead of the trade, so to speak. Now, that sounds like a rigged system. That sounds like artificial market dynamics. And here's the kicker that I think is underneath the surface in all this. We mistakenly describe where the United States is in the 2020s as a capitalist economy, and that is not true. Mm-hmm. It is a fascist economy, if you define it like Benito Mussolini did, the inventor of fascism and the innovator around that particular point of view, which was merely the close coordination between industry and government, particularly big industry, because they're the ones who concentrate economic power, and government, because they're the ones who concentrate political power. And between the two of them, they can pretty much control how a jurisdiction is going to evolve, whether that's a nation or a continent. That's the notion of fascism. And I see that definition of fascism present in so much of our culture here now, and the expectation that the president's going to have everybody from the airline industry come in, and they're going to all talk about how they're going to stabilize prices, right? Or the president's going to have everybody from the agriculture industry come in, and they're going to talk about how eggs are bad for you because they're high in cholesterol. Sure. And then for 50 years we believe them.
Remember Archer Daniels Midland? Anyone?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, there we go. The playing field's not equal. We've never had more wealth aggregation than what you have right now, even during the Gilded Age. Yeah, society's become radically unstable. And what's so crazy about it all is we're a consumer-driven economy. Do we ever sit back and think about that? I mean, one of the things that still strikes me when I knew we'd lost our goddamn minds was a few years ago that people were fighting in a Walmart over $2 or whatever it was, Chinese made towels.
Right.
And just the whole Christmas thing, consumerism in general. There's something wrong with us. That we think we're what we have, or, that presentation type of thing. I think that's shifting, and I think that mortifies the companies that are used to our consumption. But at the same time, if they can shift to this MMT thing, print money rapidly, what do they care?
Right. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that, what the pandemic has taught me is that in the last 21 months, the transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top.
Oh, yeah. It's
never been faster.
That's correct, too. I've seen those trend lines, and it's like, why does that not surprise me?
Yep. So, and in particular, the last year under a Democratic administration, which is, ironic. I think there's the lesson around political partisanship. And this is something that I think has been a meta trend for a long time, is the abandonment of political parties. I think you're going to see that happen a lot, not just in 2022, but in the whole decade ahead, is that people feel as though they don't just feel disenfranchised, they are disenfranchised. They are.
So the thing in DC, if you've spent any time there or been in the halls of power, one of the things I realized when I was profiling people of certain committees for influence by very wealthy people in this country, which I morally couldn't do anymore. It's window dressing, okay? Gay rights, abortion, all these hot button emotional things. Do you think these people care? Matt Taibbi, that's his name, I think. Rolling Stone, he used to work for Rolling Stone. I'm not sure who he writes for anymore. He wrote a great book about that. I think it was him. Wasn't it Pigs at the Trough, or who wrote Pigs at the Trough?
I don't remember.
I don't remember, but yeah.
Yeah, it's theater.
It is absolutely theater because, and then if you go to a place and we could talk about how you track how the money flows into politics. It's public information to a certain degree. They're on both sides of the deal, most of the companies and this, that, and the next thing. And he who gets the most money wins.
Mm.
And it's all just complete malarkey.
Speaking of who gets the most money, I don't know if you saw my link earlier this morning. I shot around saying that 2021 was the biggest M&A year ever, and that M&A advisory fees, Wall Street, in other words, broke the record, whatever the former record was. I think the guy said it was $157 billion in advisory fees alone on Wall Street.
I track a lot of M&A, and I end up responding in many cases, if there's various different things going on, because I head corporate strategy. What I've seen happen, and it perplexed me for a while, was, and I won't mention any names here, but let's just say some of the big LBO type firms and this, that, and the next thing, how they've moved down the value chain. And they're now looking at ever smaller companies. And I do mean ever smaller companies to load up with, to play their little game, right? Hey, we're going to buy you. You never financed your acquisitions before with all this debt that you didn't pay off very quickly, mix of equity debt. Oh, well, we're going to buy you some small company you wouldn't think they'd look at, with revenues of 250 million or less or something, even less. And they're buying these companies, maxing their debt revolvers immediately, then trying to buy more companies that they can't assimilate. And I won't mention any names on this call because I can't, but we can have a private offline conversation, I will tell you.
Right.
So when you see that kind of thing happening, what does that mean? Should I tell you? I mean,
please,
anybody else that might be on the call, it means that they've already laden all the other industries and all the other companies, with so much debt. I remember when I first started catching wind of this whole trend, probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a little longer. I was looking at the balance sheets and this, that, and the next thing in the financial structure of some of these various different companies across a variety of verticals. And I went, wait a minute. What? I can't remember one of the companies that sells like the major retailers that does pet food, and pet products and this. I can't remember if it's Petco or PetSmart or whatever it was. And at the time, I think they had $8 billion worth of debt and only 800 million in cash flow. And I went, they're insolvent for all.
Exactly. They're never paying that back. Just creditors, FYI, they're never going to pay you back.
Never going to happen, right? And then you start looking at the notes and the financial structure and their debt ratings and their bonds and this, that, and the next thing you go, wait a minute. You're maybe aware of this. How much of the debt of corporate America is junk bond right now?
Well, I think the figure I heard was about 20% of the S&P is zombie, defined as illiquid without QE support. And last year was the first time the Federal Reserve began buying junk bonds. Anyway, what's the answer? I don't know.
It's way higher than that.
I'm not surprised.
So, yeah. So this game is going to get nasty. If you go back and you look at, and the reference point for so many people is like what Enron pulled. Oh, honey. What has happened since the last crash with structured finance? This is going to become a dirtier word than the F word, okay, when people really understand what's happened here. And I don't remember who coined that first. I can't take responsibility for that, but I love it. That structured finance is a dirtier word than the F word.
Huh.
Mark my words. People are going to get this at some point. All these financial games. There were people who made jokes, that how that whole housing thing, leverage and all this last time and the calculations, how the Harvard quants were all radically wrong. And they were. That this time, you don't just have a bubble in housing. You have a bubble in everything, every asset class. And this, that, and the next thing is so elevated that it's going to be a bloodbath. And I think that's what you and I see coming is the Fed's boxed in the corner, propping all this stuff up. Okay, there's only 3 options or so how this goes. They want to shift to the 4th that we've never seen before. There's, MMT, whatever. Good luck. I don't think so. At least I sure hope not. But how do you prop up this insane debt and all this stuff that they've done? The companies in this country, we could go pick 10 large companies and go look at what their debt load and what all their finance investment, related things are, how far out their bond coupons are, how much debt they're packing versus what they make, how they're doing. I mean, okay, here's another thing we haven't talked about. Speaking of M&A and all these fees, the amount of these crazy structured type of deals that they're doing with these M&A, reverse carve-outs, a smaller company buying a much bigger one, but they're really not. It's really the other company, but they load this. And okay, I worked in M&A for a long time and on very, very large deals in some cases. I've never seen anything like it. Reverse mortgage trust things. I mean, you name it. The amount of shell companies used for this, that, and the next thing. I mean, it's mind-boggling. What has happened in the finance world? I don't recognize it anymore. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you look at the debt that these companies are packing. I mean, going back to the Petco, and okay, Eric gave the example. I mean, that was a really early one when I can't even remember what year that was, 2010, 2011, maybe.
Are you talking about
the Guitar Center thing? What year was that even? I don't know.
Boy, 2012, maybe?
Maybe.
I think it was a little after that.
Yeah, it was a long freaking time ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, I started looking at the bond stuff underneath this. I'm like, Eric, look at this. Yeah, we weren't wrong.
Right.
And they had, their guys come out and attack him and this, that, and the next thing and say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not a finance analyst. And he says, well, my friend Monica does M&A. So how about she looks at your stuff? And, I thought it was kind of funny. They didn't come after me in the public domain. They were silent after I wrote what I had to say. But they kept charging Eric because I think I was a little less known, a little less publicly visible. And I don't think they knew how to tangle and tackle with me.
Right.
Because I put it right there and I'm like, look, your payment on your main buildings and stuff like that in New York City are more than your cash flow. How are you paying your suppliers? How are you paying your people? Crickets.
Well, you're asking questions that have no easy answers.
And there is an easy answer. You can't make your payments.
It's not easy for them to answer it in a way that.
So how we ever got to the point that anybody accepted that knew anything about finance, what was going on here? But that's what they count on, right? Is that most people have no idea how money works, where money comes from, right? Like you say, fiat. Where does money come from?
Right.
People don't know. Money is debt, loans, right? That's how money comes into existence.
Well, and every dollar in your wallet is a promissory note.
Yeah.
That you bear the redemption against, and that promissory note is by a debtor whose only incentive is to make their liability smaller. And so the only way they can do that is either to confiscate those promissory notes from you as a bearer of them. And they're going to, well, actually, that is the only way. They're going to confiscate it one of two ways. They're going to tax it or they're going to inflate it out of buying power. And that hidden tax, the hidden tax that is inflation, punishes those least equipped to pay. And
it's expensive to be poor in America. There have been some people who've done that, just like on, people who don't have bank accounts.
Yeah.
They go and I was reading something about this, and I wasn't really cognizant of this because I have a normal bank account. I don't pay any fees because I keep money in the bank, and you probably don't pay any fees either. My fees last year are zero. Zero. Hell, they give me money, on my credit card and this, that, and the next thing. Oh, Monica, you spent $25,000 on your card last year. We give you, I don't know what percentage it is back, but every quarter they put money back into my account. Right. They pay me. Great. So poor people, however, if they have to go and get, what do you call it? A cashier's check. They pay for that. They take a percentage of the transaction. If you're cashing checks somewhere else, Walmart got big into that, we'll cash your checks for anything. And some of these other people, for a percentage of the face value of whatever the check was. And the next thing, yeah, it's expensive to be poor if you don't have a bank account. That kind of stunned me when I read that article about how that works.
By the way, Walmart had to start doing that because the dollar stores came in under Walmart, and the sort of dollar store phenomenon from, I don't know, 25 years ago or so, when that phenomenon started, it was the only place where you could reliably turn your welfare check into diapers or baby formula or whatever else you needed. And so that whole dollar store thing, that's now more like the $1.50 store, I understand.
I was going to say that. I saw that the other day, that they're jacking up. There's your inflation, people.
Exactly. Yeah. But that, so those financial services, and I guess, did you see the story about El Salvador and how El Salvador's making Bitcoin part of its monetary system, as the first country in the world to do that, and how much flack they got as a result, because suddenly here's a nation state who's saying, we believe, we have more confidence in this decentralized financial instrument and new asset class than we have in the fiat currencies of other nations or our own fiat currency. Now, that there was a guy named, you may have heard of this guy, Mark Moss. He's a YouTuber, and he did a documentary about it about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and it's fascinating. But essentially, in that documentary, his hypothesis is decentralized finance, and particularly El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin as part of their treasury strategy, represented the obsolescence of the nation state itself. It means that the nation state is obsolete. Now, there's a meta trend for you that sort of fits into a lot of these other things we've been talking about: privacy, decentralization, the rise. I think deurbanization, people migrating out of metropolitan areas because those metropolitan areas are filled with crime and inflation and,
Do you know what? Do you know that New York and New Jersey, for example, when you leave those states, they're actually forcing people to pay exit taxes?
I've heard that. California.
It's true. It's true. I know some New Yorkers and some people from New Jersey here. Yeah, they had to do that. And I've heard California is either kind of doing the same thing or thinking about doing the same thing.
I think the California proposal was that if you were a resident of California, there's a schedule where your income is still taxable, even though you don't live there. So all these people moving to Texas and Nashville and all that sort of thing, they've still got some sort of tax liability there. I've never lived in California, so I have no appreciation for this one way or the other. But I mean, why would anyone go there if that's part of the deal, is that you are essentially an indentured servant when you relocate? You decide, wow, I've moved, I don't live in this jurisdiction anymore, yet you still want a piece of my behind.
Yeah. So I can remember, after the 2008 crash, right? And everybody in corporate strategy and strategic intelligence lost their damn jobs for the most part. Right. And only a certain amount of us went back into that, right? A lot of people rebranded, did other things.
Yep.
But I forgot where I was going with this. God, I need more coffee. Where was I?
We're talking about California taxation.
Oh, yeah. So,
president.
Right. So when I started looking for another job, I had a lot of people coming after me because I built ground up intelligence functions in big companies successfully, and startups and whatnot. I think you and I both know about 70+% of them fail, right?
Yep.
So I had numerous companies, TechSphere, of course, in San Francisco, that were trying to recruit me to go down there. And it was really funny. They didn't want to talk salary at all. And you think that I don't know how expensive San Francisco is? Yeah,
right.
Time there, I know how expensive it is. And what house it was. A 1-bedroom apartment, even back around that time, was $3,500 a month down there or something. It was insane. And, they didn't want to pay me as much as, what I was making when I'd worked for Ricoh, or maybe a little more than I made for HP before that. But, without mentioning numbers, but it was ludicrous.
Yeah.
Because they say today, for example, if you're going to be in San Francisco, San Jose type area, this, that, the next thing, poverty level is $150,000.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, nonetheless, if you have kids and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but the minute when you do the calculation of moving into California, your tax rate goes up 11% with all the other stuff California imposes on top of that. And yeah, so, absolute no go.
I used to love San Francisco, and I haven't been there
do
for a few years now, but man, I don't think there's enough money to pay me to live there in ever. Uh,
Well,
and
Oakland has become more expensive now, from what I've heard from some of my buddies down there, gentrified, this, that, the next thing, than San Francisco. It's
Really?
going this oppositional weird way. Yeah. So, that's going to get interesting.
Yeah. So the unsustainability of things in the absence of an underwriter.
Free money.
Yeah. If there's no free money, all this sort of has to
Collapse and rubble, or
Yeah,
change the system to make things counted differently to where it's not the same in a way we've never seen before.
Yep.
That's what
So
we're looking at.
Diversification is probably one of those meta trends that people are going to be thinking about. Now, I've got enough dollars, I guess, on the sidelines so that I'm ready when something implodes, and I'm able to, do what people did in 1929, essentially, which is people who had money made fortunes as a result of buying up those assets that deflated.
Yep.
And so there is.
So it's a horrible time to buy anything right now. That's right. Stay on the sidelines. Everything's overinflated. Hold your dollars.
Dry powder.
A lot of people have told me, why do you still have money even in your 401k? Why don't you get it now if you believe, like you believe? And I think about that, because do I believe that it's going to go down like it did last time? Yeah, I do. Or worse. And should I take that money and put it in, like you say, to chickens in the backyard?
Precious metals.
Precious metals, right.
Brass and lead, as well as silver and gold.
Bullets,
as they say, right? Exactly.
Extra food, whatever you might need, because, and then you talk about it, and right, like we are, because we kind of see this thing, and people think that, oh my God, to use it's almost an epithet, of you guys are preppers or something like that.
Yeah.
Because you believe in, and you've seen the government even address this, right? Oh, you guys are, nuts to. Okay. But look at how much, I talk to a lot of people and they have, they have made some investments in making sure that, let's just put it, their vote of confidence that all this can continue, even those people that don't know quite what we know about some of these things, is diminishing. And they too are thinking, well, they also expect the price inflation, that it will be cheaper next week to buy it than last week. So people are maxing their credit cards. People are buying things. People are stocking their house up, and this, that, and the next thing. So maybe the whole damn nation has become preppers to a certain degree.
I think that's probably at least doubled in the last 21 months since the lockdowns hit, and toilet paper was hard to come by. I recall those toilet paper outages and so forth.
Yeah.
And as we kind of tie this off, I will say that last year I decided that, though I've got a few extra cans of tuna and Dinty Moore stew and stuff like that set aside, which
I hope you never have to eat.
Exactly, which will never expire, and I hope I never have to eat. I did go out and make some supplementation, and I picked up some freeze-dried stuff, and I have 6 people in my house, and if you I'm not expecting to need this stuff, but
you better have it in case you do.
What would a human in a breakdown situation need from a calorie standpoint? And if you figure about a 3,000 calorie a day diet, assuming I'm out chopping wood and tilling the fields and growing stuff and all that sort of thing, that's 1 million calories a person. And so that became my goal last year, was I'd like to have 1 million calories per member of the household set aside just in case. And that way, if this whole pandemic thing went really sour and this turned into a plague, and we didn't want to go to the grocery store, we wouldn't have to. It's basically, you've got
impossible for people like you and me to go because we're not keen on the vaccination thing.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So you've seen the impetus toward that in certain cases, and people like us, I guess, who have a little bit of healthy skepticism and distrust given the changing narratives, and looking at the adverse reactions database and a variety of other things. And people like me that have immuno issues, which is the main primary reason why I wouldn't take it in the first place. Nonetheless, seeing what the CFR was, and I went, it's not worth it for me.
Yeah.
But
well, that and
knowing what we know, about it, it's like, now I really, I see that the people that are saying, we've got all these cardiopulmonary related problems, post-vax. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm really concerned.
And that's the thing I think about the vaccine strategy that's so befuddling is, even if it's as safe and effective as they say it is, it's being
It doesn't look like it, does it?
But it's being administered incorrectly. And that's something that people are shooting it into their bloodstream. That's not how these work. These work, you are intended to shoot this into a subcutaneous muscular tissue and have
but
a very.
You and I know it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the definition typically of vaccine either.
Right. Yeah.
For multiple ways. So now the CDC or whatever is going to change the definition of what a vaccine is. I saw that not long ago, right?
Right.
Jesus. I wish I could do that, in my personal life, something I don't like, in my work and my research. Well, I don't like that. I'm just going to redefine that.
I'm just going to redefine it.
I'm just going to redefine that,
Well, let's wrap this up with, what are your plans tonight, Monica? What are you doing for New Year's Eve?
I'm going to have a couple friends over and make, some nice dinner. I think we're trying to decide what we're going to have right now. How about you? I'm not going out, not on these roads. No way.
I haven't gone out on New Year's Eve since we started having kids. That was 18 years ago, I guess. So we're going to be home with the kids as usual. The kids want to stay up all night. Well, like half of them do. Half of them want to stay up all night. I'm like, why would you do that? That just doesn't make any sense. We're barely going to make it to midnight, I'm sure. And if it's like most New Year's Eves, Tina will probably knock off about 11.
If I make it that long, it'll be a miracle.
Right on, sister.
When you're over 35, right? It's like, probably even younger, going to the bar, paying a cover fee to be around a bunch of people who get sloppy drunk, paying for overpriced drinks, and then having to get in your car and drive with other people who are, running around intoxicated. The risk is pretty tremendous.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I'll just stay home and stay nice and warm. And it's cold here and the roads are horrible. So, and I'm just too old, once we hit what we are, being born in the same year, the 50 set, it's like, yeah, okay, that's just not quite so fun anymore.
We like our rest. We like to sleep. We like peace and quiet. And
well, it's been a couple years in the first place. And, if we're sitting here looking on the precipice of another year that is going to be extraordinarily turbulent, where we still haven't eliminated, supposedly, this whole COVID debacle thing and whatnot, which I don't think you and I are really all that afraid of, but and all the other things that we've talked about, just the trying to mentally, physically, emotionally steel yourself for that. Yeah, maybe a little extra sleep wouldn't be a bad thing.
Exactly.
A little rest, relaxation.
Well, Monica, let me be the first to wish you a happy new year.
Same. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you. And thank you, Eric, too, wherever you are, for helping me kick this back off again. And we're going to take the weekend off, and then we'll get back together again next week as we're able, and that's what I hope we do with Close the Distance is, as you're able to join, feel free to join or not. And, but thank you very much for all your help, sort of getting this exploration back underway. And I hope to invite some interesting people into this conversation going forward. So, consider yourself a co-founder of this thing, and we'll figure out what it is in 2022.
All right. It'd be fun to pull in some other people with some other perspectives as well, and have a broader dialogue than the three of us. But yeah, that'd be great.
Amen.
All
well,
right.
Thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, anybody who watches this. Have a happy new year, and we'll see you next year, as my kids like to tell me on New Year's Eve.
All right. Take care.